took my loved one. God took my loved one. Now, when I refer to the phrase, God took my loved one, I simply mean that God was solely responsible for causing the death of a certain individual. But if you understood the character of God, you will find that it was not God who took your loved one. But far too often, when someone loses to death, a husband, a wife, a father, a child, God always gets the blame. And because of this fallacy, many have hated, many have rejected the love of God because they simply believe that it was God who took their loved one. Now, once again, when I refer to the phrase, God took my loved one, I'm simply talking about that God was solely responsible for taking the life of an individual. But we find that it is not God that takes one loved one from them, but it is the enemy, and I will get to that in just a little bit. Now, if people understood biblical history and the character of God, they will find that it was God's original intent for man to live forever in this body. I'm talking about the absence of death. Death not even entering into the life of a man or a woman. But because of Adam's sin in the garden, he committed high treason against God. Then death was passed on to all men. Do I have a witness? But that was not God's original intent. But when Adam sinned and committed high treason against God, death was passed on to all men. And if you look close enough at this, you will find that Satan was responsible for the fall of mankind. And this is why we call Satan the father of death. Let me let it sink in just for a minute. This is why we call Satan the father of death. God is the father of life. But Satan was responsible for lying and beguiling the man and the woman in the garden. And because when they failed in the garden, a sentence was passed. So God had to change his original plan. And I'll talk to you about that here in just a little bit. But Satan now is the father of death. And he also is the God of this world's system. Now, if you can remember, Jesus made a very interesting statement in John 10:10. Jesus said, "The thief cometh not but to steal, kill, and destroy." But he said that, "But I have come that you might have life, and have life abundantly." So actually, man messed up the plan of God. Because God's original intent was for a man to live for eternity in his body. So when that plan was not played out in the Garden of Eden, God had to come up with another plan. I wished I had somebody that was going to pray with me here. So Satan is responsible for death entering into the world. Not God, but Satan. So I understand because of emotions and people not understanding biblical history and the character of God. When something happens to a child, when something happens to a mother or father, a husband or wife, God automatically gets the blame. But you have to understand that God is not the father of death, but God is the father of life. For he sent Jesus that we might have life, and have life abundantly. So Jesus, if you look at this now, he came into the world to undo what was done in the Garden of Eden. You were supposed to have a body that death was never supposed to touch that body, but because of sin, the plan of God, original plan, was found. So God had to come up with another plan to give us what he always wanted us to have, but you got to die in order to get it. I wish somebody that was going to pray with me here. Now, let's look at Hebrews, the 2nd chapter. I want to prove my point when I'm talking about this. Because, a lot of times people are afraid, because of what's going to happen and whatever. But there are some things that happen that you can't stop. So Hebrews, the 2nd chapter, verses 14 and 15. When you get there, say amen. Hebrews, the 2nd chapter, verses 14 through 15. I want you to listen to this. I want you to pay very close attention to it now. That's Hebrews, the 2nd chapter, verses 14 and 15. Notice it now. For as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, the children, he's talking about us. We are partakers of flesh and blood. We have a flesh and blood body. So he's talking about us. For as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same. He's talking about Jesus. That through death he might destroy him that has the power of death, that is the devil. The power of death. So God is not the author of death, Satan is. So Jesus came, and through his death that he might destroy the one who had the power of death, which was Satan. Do you see that now? And to deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. In other words, because we don't know the truth. We are in fear and we live in bondage because we are thinking about what's going to happen at the end of my life. When someone gets to be 65, 70 years old, 75 years old, death is in the back of their mind. See, but the fact of the matter is, you have not understood biblical history and the actual plan of God. See, God had to rearrange his plan because men fouled it up. See, God is going to give you something that he always wanted you to have, and that was a body that would live for eternity. That was God's original intent. See, but I can't get there until I close my eyes. But before I close my eyes, I got to believe that Jesus came that I might have life and life abundantly. Are you listening to me? But now, because of fear and living in bondage, some people cannot live their life thinking about the inevitable because death is imminent. You don't leave here because you have already been told that it's going to happen. So you might as well go ahead and live your life and live your life abundantly because it is going to happen. But because of what happened in the Garden of Eden, the body can't live because the body is steadily deteriorating. And God has already told you that this is going to happen. But because we don't never get enough word in us, and we never understand biblical history, we become afraid that one day I'm going to die. One day, I'm going to be laid in the casket. One day, my child is going to die. One day, my husband is going to die. God had already told you that's going to happen. See, but God gave you some good news also. This life that you live now, I want somebody to hear me now. This life that you're living now is not the life that God actually wants you to live. Because if it was what God wanted you to have, you wouldn't die. If this is what God wanted you to have, did you not know that what God makes is forever? All right. So it's like you come into this world and it seems like you're living to prove your worthiness to receive that body that God originally wanted you to have. So when I look at this thing, this is not really the life that God wanted me to have. This right here is just a substitute. And when I shut my eyes, then I'm going to be living the life that God really wanted me to have. That's why there is a disconnect, if you will, from someone that has come through this life, and now they're living the life that God really wanted them to have. That's why they can identify with us on earth, because they really see life different. They'll see life like God really wanted them to have it when they get to heaven. But Jesus had to come in order for us to have that. See, God didn't take your loved one, but God gave his loved one that your loved one might live again. He didn't take your loved one. But because of the lies of the enemy, but because of ignorance, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. Because of not getting your Bible lesson, you see this as a bad thing, but honey, in order to get to the real thing, you got to go through the bad thing. Right. See, God has already given you a heads up. You can't stay, sometimes if you think about, living for 100 years, to be 100 years old, why would you want to live to be 100 years old? Everybody that you know going to be dead, that you grew up with, your body is not going to cooperate with it. Those knees that used to be very spry, that eyesight that you didn't need the glasses to see, all that black hair that you had at one time, all of that is going to be depleted. Are you listening to me? But God said, I sent my son that you might have life and have life abundantly. So when you see someone pass on, whether they lived their life, they had longevity in life, or someone that died premature, understand now that it was not God that took your loved one. Because God is not the father of death, but he is the father of life. Are you listening to me? And so, his intention, God's original intention, all you got to do is just read the Bible, you'll find it. That's why God said, I have to send you teachers. I have to send you preachers to unfold the meaning of my intent. So God had an original intent. So why did God have to back off of his original intent? Because number one, he is a just God, and what he says, he has to carry it through. Because he told the man and the woman, the day that you eat of this tree, you shall surely die. So it was not God's original intention for a man to die. But the enemy showed up and lied to the man and woman and said that, did God say? Did God say that you're not the church, that you won't die, and what have you? But when they committed high treason, in other words, a betrayal of God's trust, then God had to carry out what he said, but did God do it? No. Who did it? The enemy came, and then man disobeyed God. So can you see how important it is to obey God to every level, because there are consequences that will befall you when you fail to obey God. And then you can't turn around and blame God for the consequences. Because God will say that I told you But God always has a plan. Always has a backup plan. Are you listening to me? Now, God is not the author of destruction, but Satan is. God is not the author of hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis. God is not the author of that. And these catastrophic events that leave cities in devastation. Countless people lose their lives. Many people are left homeless. But God is not the author of this destruction. But nevertheless, people will label this as an act of God. Where was God in all of this? Where was God when my husband died? Where was God when my child died? Where was God when my mother died? Where was God when my relative died? Where was God? But you have to understand now. Please understand, Yolanda, that God is not the author of devastation. He's not the author. When you see a hurricane, God didn't start that. I mean, that God can come up with more creative ways to destroy your life if he wanted to. So he's not the author of tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, and all of that. And yet people will say that, God, this is an act of God. An act of God. Have you ever heard anybody say that before? Yes. When a tornado goes through a city, just totally demolish a school, and it's a junior high school or whatever, and kids are killed and what have you, go through a city, and people are left homeless and what have you, and the city is devastated and destroyed because of an act of God. God did not come to destroy me alive, but God came to save me alive. So, God didn't take your loved one. And God showed us that he didn't take your loved one because he gave his loved one so that your loved one might live. Amen. Amen. Are you listening to me? And so, every person, if you talk to them about life and death, or people are very joyful about life, but see, not knowing that you're going to have to go through that. You may as well embrace it because it's going to happen. But in order to get to the life that God always wanted you to have, you got to die to get it. I've had dreams and visions of Mama and Daddy. I had a vision of my sister and Daddy. And these were godly people now. And I guess that's how I got to be, in the kingdom of God and called into the kingdom and then called into the ministry and what have you. So after my daddy and mama died, I didn't blame God because, they both died in their 50s. They died premature. But I never blamed God for it. Even though I didn't understand what I understand now regarding death. But I had a vision of Daddy and Mama and what have you. And Daddy looked younger than I did. Yeah. And he was my dad. Yeah. And I remember Mama telling me, she said, Norris, don't you worry about me anymore because I'm happy now. I'm in joy. Now, that's what Mama said. Yeah. And my sister Betty, the vision that I had, she told me what she was doing in heaven. She told me that she was teaching school in the University of Christ. And I asked her, I said, now, is all of that in heaven? She said, yes, all of this is in heaven. She said, because I'm doing in heaven what I couldn't do on the earth. In other words, she was saying that I'm not living the life that I was supposed to live on the earth. But because of the curse that Satan brought on the world, I died premature. So when I died premature, I woke up. And because of Christ, I'm able to live the life that I always was supposed to live on the earth. Amen. Did you not know? Saints, please listen. The Bible talks about a new heaven and a new earth. Did you not know that God is going to remake, he's going to refashion this earth, and nothing but righteousness is going to be in the earth. The earth is going to be one day like it was supposed to be in the beginning. See, heaven for some people is just going to be a way station. You're going to go, and when God redo the earth, because everything that's in the earth is going to be burning up because it's contaminated. See, the things in the earth now, they are contaminated. And see, God is going to get every contaminated thing out of the earth so that he can populate the earth with nothing but righteousness. So, talking about, going to heaven, that's fine. Whether I'm in heaven or whether I'm in the new earth, it don't really make a difference, because one thing I do know, that I'm going to be living the life that I always wanted to live. Now, can you imagine? Let me just think with me just for a minute here. Can you imagine not needing any sleep? Can you imagine not needing food to survive? Can you imagine not needing water to survive? Can you imagine your knees never getting weak? Can you imagine that you're never getting sick, never having any disease or what have you? That's the kind of body that God wanted you to have. And you remember, when Jesus came into the world, he called himself the Son of Man, didn't he? Jesus ate because he needed food. Jesus drank water because he needed water and what have you. Jesus got tired and what have you, didn't he? But Jesus, when he went through death, he changed. Y'all didn't hear what I said. Jesus came into the world actually to show how it's going to be. So when he came into the world, he didn't come into the world as the Son of God. He came into the world as the Son of Man. So in other words, to become Son of Man, he had to just get into man. In other words, to live as a man. Get hungry, need water, got tired, all of that. But when they nailed him to the cross, and when he went down into hell, stayed 3 days and 3 nights, and when he was resurrected from the dead, he was resurrected from the dead with a flesh and bone body. In other words, a body that could not die and be touched anymore. And if I can say this, Jesus is saying, this is kind of the body that you're going to have when you are resurrected. Am I helping anybody? So, when Jesus was resurrected from the dead, he went up on the earth. He went up on the earth for 40 days before he ascended back to heaven. Okay? So, he was actually saying, if I can say this, the body that you see me have, now he told Thomas, he said, now Thomas, he said, it's me. He said, there was no blood in my body. No, there was no blood. He was resurrected with a flesh and bone body. And that body could not be touched by death anymore. So Jesus came so that there was going to come a time where death won't be able to touch you anymore. But know this, as you keep walking, that was the beginning when you were born, but there is going to be a road bump, and it's called death. But when you cross the road bump, you're finally going to be living the life that God always wanted you to have. So the fact of the matter is, what I'm trying to take the fear out of it for you. Because there ain't nothing you can do about it. You can't stop it. It cannot be avoided. It's inevitable. It's imminent. So why am I afraid and got all caught up in something I can't stop? But one thing I can do is prepare myself so that when I get to that place, it'll just be a moment and in a twinkling of an eye. Now, did you not know that when Christ returns, there are still going to be people alive on the earth? Did you not know that? But before they go to be with him, the people that are still in the earth that live the right, that didn't taste of physical death. The Bible says, in a moment, and in the twinkling of an eye, they shall be changed, and they shall be caught up to meet the Lord in the air. In other words, they are going to be changed. In other words, they're going to be given a new something. What are they going to be given? A new something. A new body. That's what they're going to be given. There you go, Julia. A new body waiting for you. But you got to earn it here.
All right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You got to die to get it. Now that, I'll get to that in just a little bit here. Now, God is not the author of destruction. He's not the one that's bringing the tornadoes, the earthquakes and all of that. Satan is doing that. But Satan hides his hand, and God gets the blame. God gets the blame. But God has already told us in his word and told preachers to preach, tell my people that it's not me. Tell my people that my original intent was for them to have life and have life eternity, to have a body that wasn't supposed to die, absent from death. But because Satan is lying so much, when these things happen to somebody that's close to us, we automatically think that is God. But honey, it's not God. God has already told you the reason why it happened, because without sin, death was passed on to all men. And so, in order for you to have what God wants you to have, now you got to die and get it. So Jesus, when Jesus came and died on the cross, Jesus fixed it so that you can have it. But that's something that you got to go through. So you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. See, because we don't understand it, that's because we're so fearful of it. We're so fearful of it. People falling out. You know, and I'm very sympathetic of it because I know that people don't understand it. I didn't always understand it. But you know, when you spend enough time with God, he began to reveal to you this plan that he had originally, and then this plan that he has made it through Jesus. God always had a plan. And now, let's turn to Luke, the 9th chapter. And this right here should refute something that people have been saying about his God. Luke, the 9th chapter, 52nd verse. Start with the 52nd verse. When you get there, say amen. Are you there? Luke 9, starting with the 52nd verse, and sent messengers, and it came to pass, start with the 51st verse, and it came to pass when the time was come that he should be received up, talking about Jesus, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem, and sent messengers before his face, and they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. Now notice in the 53rd verse. And they did not receive him, because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. So they didn't want to receive him. They didn't want to receive Jesus. Jesus was getting ready to go to Jerusalem and what have you. His plan was to go to Jerusalem, but for whatever reason, somebody in this particular area did not receive Jesus. Now notice in the 54th verse. And when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elijah did? Now, now, James and John, they saw Jesus being mistreated. And obviously, they didn't like it. They said, well, Lord, you know, like, they're mistreating you. So, do you want us to pray and call down fire to come from heaven and consume these people that are mistreating you? And Jesus looked at them. And Jesus said to them, you don't know what kind of spirit that you are of. Don't you know that I did not come to destroy me alive, but to save their lives? Now, if Jesus had gave the instructions about the go-ahead to call fire to come down from heaven and consume them, it could have happened. But Jesus knew why he came into the earth, and that was to save and not destroy. Now let me read it for you. The 5th verse. But he turned and rebuked James and John, and said unto them, you know not what manner of spirit ye are. Ye are of. For the Son of Man, notice he called himself the Son of Man, not the Son of God. For the Son of Man is not come to destroy me alive, but to save them. And they went to another village. So you see that? God did not take your loved one. Now, when I was working many years ago at the museum and what have you, that's when I got saved. I got saved in my early years at the museum. And there was another preacher there. And then there were several other people that we would get together. And we would always be talking about God. We would be talking about God, how good God is, and the love of God and what have you. And there's one particular person that worked at the museum, overheard us this particular time talking about God and how good God was and what have you. And she said, and I quote, y'all believe in that stuff? I said, well, yes, we do believe in that stuff. She said, the reason why I don't believe, because God took my sister. So I can't believe in somebody that would take my sister's life at an early age and what have you. And the fact of the matter is, there is no sense in trying to make a correction then, because she wasn't going to understand. Because if a person actually believed that God took their child, that God took their husband or wife, father, mother, whatever, sister, God have to come along and straighten that out over a period of time. So she asked me, y'all believe in that mess? And it was her sister. Her sister had a son. And he also hated and rejected God because he believed that it was God that took his mama. See, but you have to understand that God is not in the business of taking people's loved one premature. But you have to understand that it was a sentence that was passed on. Or passed on to every man. Now, so Jesus told his disciples, James and John, you don't know what kind of spirit you are of. Did you not know that I didn't come to destroy men's lives? But I came to save them? And the fact of the matter is, him speaking like that, they still didn't understand the totality of the statement that Jesus made, and you find believers. We don't understand this. We feel that, okay, like I'm living to die, whatever, but you have to understand now, this life that you're living is not the life that God really wants you to have, because if you're living the life that God wants you to have, you wouldn't die. So obviously, this ain't the life. It's just a beginning of the new life that you're going to live. Because I understand, Pastor Reese understands. It's a fact. It's not a fallacy. Pastor Reese, in time, going to leave here. All the men that I admired, Oral Roberts, Fred Price, Kenneth Hale, Catherine Kuhlman, my mama, my daddy, my sister, my father-in-law, J.C. Bell, my mother-in-law, Willie Mayberry, they all left and I saw it. And I preached the funeral of some of them. But I have to understand that the same path they took, I must take also. But in order to have what God always wanted me to have, I got to go that way. I got to go there. It can't be avoided. I can put on all the mascara. Or you can put on all the mascara you want to. I don't know. Let me make a correction. You can put on all of the mascara you want to. I can use all of it just for me, and I want to. I can go to the gym, do an hour on the treadmill every day. All it's doing is just keeping me looking nice. but it's not going to prolong the inevitable. So since you know, since you already know that it's going to happen, just live the best that you can. But guess what? The real Paul let it wait.
All right now.
See, God got to destroy this body in order to give you another body. Are you listening to me? See, this body of sin got to be destroyed. Because flesh and blood cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. So this got to be destroyed. And when God takes this away, God got something else waiting. And so I'm not going to be getting up on Monday, dreading what's going to happen in the next 15 or 20 years. I can't stop it. You know, I was looking at some pictures last night. Some pictures that I took when I was in the Navy. Some pictures that I took when I first came to Omaha. You know, some recent pictures and whatever. I simply don't look the same. The body is deteriorating. And there is nothing that you can do to stop it. I mean, like, my hair was total black. Didn't have any gaps in it at all. Had a full gray black beard. A full, brother, beard. Black. I mean, look young. But the passing of 40 years changed. See, but God has already said that this is going to happen. It cannot be avoided. It's going to happen. But thanks be to God that Jesus came 2,000 years ago and brought things back to God's original plan. Now, what was God's original plan? Now, think about that. What was God's original plan? God's original plan, Larry, was for a man and a woman to live forever. Okay? He didn't mean for you to. He didn't mean for us to die. The absence of death. But because sin came in, God had to change his plan. I'm going to show you in just a minute. Now, am I helping anybody? See, now I can understand you dread and you have to go to work every day.
Yeah.
And you need that if you're going to live here. But I'm not saying that you got to like it. I'm not saying that you got to like what's going to happen at the end of your life. But in order to get to God, you're going to have to go through it. So stop laying down thinking, man, I'm getting old. That beauty that you have now, that beauty that you have now, that beauty that you have now is going to be restored. You remember I told you that my dad looked younger than I? See, when my daddy was living, my daddy was a little bit shorter than I. He was a handsome man, you know, but Lord have mercy, but I didn't know him when he was young. See, I always saw him as an older man because he was my dad. And you know, we always look at our mother and fathers as somebody old, you know, but I got the opportunity to see how my daddy looked when God got through with it. I said, my goodness, Daddy, you look younger than I do. And he started laughing. He had what God wanted him to have. And Mama, see, Mama was a pretty woman. I could tell her when I was young. But Lord have mercy, I saw her when God refashioned her. You're talking about a beautiful woman. Beautiful. But when Mama passed away, Mama was in a wheelchair. She got to the point where she couldn't walk. She had gained a lot of weight, and she couldn't do the stuff that she wanted to do and whatever. But when I saw her after she had crossed over, God had given her a beautiful body, a body that could not be touched by death again. But she had to die to get it. Daddy had to die to get it. And see, when you look at it like that, I'm going to live my life to the very best of my ability. See, because I know that I'm leaving here, but I want what God has for me. Amen. See, and this is how come the devil is screwing with people, if I can say that, if I can use this terminology, because the devil understands that God got something for them that they don't understand what's coming. Because now, if you miss him in this life, Not only are you going to experience physical death, you're going to experience a second death, which means that you're going to be banned from God for all eternity. That's why, see, the devil is out to more than try and make you sick and get you fired off of a job. To keep you harass you and do nasty little dirty things to you and have another girl come and steal your boyfriend or have another man come and take your woman or what have you. The devil, you know, he understands about life more than we do. He understands that if they give their life to Jesus, they're going to have what God always wanted them to have. So he's screwing with you to keep you from having what God wants you to have. Everybody not going to be rich here. Everybody not going to be famous here. Everybody not going to have the best of life because there's been a curse that's passed down. And God was not the author of it. But guess what? God got something for you. All you got to do is just recognize and confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Now, let me go on when I say this. Do you understand the meaning of inevitable, imminent? Something can't be avoided. That is something that's inevitable, something that's imminent, something that cannot be avoided, something that you cannot avert or get around, and that is death. You can't get around it. But yet, people almost act like this ain't going to happen. But it is. I remember, you know, they not too long ago, sitting with my father-in-law talking with him. Next thing you know, he's gone. Next thing you know, and Pam had a dream about it. He was in a better place too. See, that's how come when people cross over, they don't want to come back because there was a disconnect. So wake up in the morning. Be encouraged and be joyful to know that it was not God, but God came that you might have life and have life abundantly. Now let me go on now. Listen to the saints. Death is an issue that you need to settle your mind, because you and your loved one will eventually be passed away. It's a fact. Because death is, listen to me very carefully, is a horrible sentence that is passed on to every man that first begun in the Garden of Eden. It cannot be avoided. It is a horrible sentence. When you have committed a crime, you're indicted. They have a trial. And the verdict comes in and say, guilty as charged. That is the sentence passed on to you as many years as the judge, as many years that the judge gives you. At that time, it can't be avoided. You can't get around it. It was the sentence that was passed on to you. So, all meaning, it was a horrible sentence that was passed on to us that started in the Garden of Eden. Now listen to me. I didn't have anything to do with that. I wasn't here. I wasn't even thought of. But God knew me. Everything comes out of God. I wasn't even thought of at the time. But nevertheless, I didn't have anything to do what happened in the Garden of Eden. My responsibility as a person being born into the world, because I'm born into the world spiritually blind. And it's inevitable that I'm going to die. But now, let's just say if I pass on and don't find Jesus, I'm going to die a second death. Physical death, and then second death awaits me, which means that I can't be with God because of the body I didn't allow Jesus to clean. Are you listening to me? So you got to go through Jesus in order to experience the new birth. And when you experience the new birth, and when you wake up on the other side, God got a body waiting for you. My only responsibility at Lillian is to find God in my 85 years. My only responsibility is, because God is going to make sure now that he sent someone to me to tell me that he came in as the Son of Man, but yet he was the Son of God. And my responsibility is to acknowledge that so that when I wake up, I can be with him and not die a second death. The Bible talks about a second death, y'all. You were born dead spiritually. You're going to die a physical death, and if you don't find Jesus, you're going to die a second death, which means to be banished from Almighty God for all eternity. So, if I can encourage anybody, please, don't be fearful. To know that you're going to see, I'm going to see my Uncle Sam, my Uncle Jimmy, my Uncle Jim, my Big Mama. I'm going to daddy, I'm going to see all the folks because they're all there. Amen. And there are going to be some that you won't see. Because they made a decision that wasn't right. But I want to make sure that I give you enough information that you make an intelligent decision because you leaving here. And before I go, let me say this. Last night when I look at those pictures, man, it's kind of trouble. You know, you shut your eyes and you be thinking about, because you can remember this when the picture was taken. You remember the time what you were going through and, the music that was popular at the time and what have you. Looking to see how you're looking, what have you. And you look in the mirror, boy. I don't look the same. Guess what? No, you don't look the same. But you know what? A change is coming. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, you shall be saved because God got to get rid of that. That's what you're in? God got to get rid of it. God got to get rid of that. God got to get rid of this because it's contaminated. It's contaminated because God got something for you that ain't contaminated. Let me show you something here. Let's turn to Romans 5. When you get to Romans 5, there's one verse in Romans that I want you to see. Romans 5 and 12. Write it down if you can't get there, but here it is. Romans 5 and 12. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death was passed on all men, for all have sinned. Do you see that, Pastor Reese ain't making this up? Because of one man. What one man am I talking about? I'm talking about Adam. Because of one man, sin entered the world. And because sin entered the world, death now has been passed upon all men. It's in the Bible, so God has given you a hedge up. God has given you a hedge up. So he said that in order to live, you got to understand and confess and recognize that my son came. So do you see that? Romans 5 and 12, he's giving us a heads up. Now notice in Psalms 90. Turn to Psalm 90. Just one verse out of Psalm 90. That 10th verse. In Psalms 90 in the 10th verse, the days of our years are 80 years and 10. That's 70 years. And it goes on to say, if by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet if their strength labor in sorrow, but it is soon cut off, and we fly away. Another heads up. Another heads up. 7 years, but by reason of strength. Some of you living to be 80, 85, 90 years old or what have you, And some people talk about, they try to believe God to live for 120 years. Tell me, I can't remember anybody living for 120 years. None of this generation. 120 years. You find every so often, someone gets to be 101, 102, 105, maybe, but 120? See, first of all, your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, all of them going to be gone. And the fact of the matter is, you know how we are. Somebody get old and feeble or whatever, you don't want to be bothered with them. You ever go by the house, how you doing? You gone. How you doing? I got to go. You go to the store for them.
Come on now.
You buy the medicine for them. But you're not going to sit there alone. See, because first of all, you think they don't know nothing, but just think about living in the world for 100 years, how much knowledge they have if they have their right mind. See, but God usually takes you out of here by that time. Because He will allow you, because it's inevitable. It's inevitable. Now the Bible says in Hebrews 9:27, as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment. As it is appointed unto men once to die, and after this the judgment. The judgment means that you're going to stand before Jesus. And He's going to talk about things that you were supposed to do while you were in the earth. Because only the people that get to know Jesus while they're in this earth are going to stand before Jesus. If you didn't get to know Jesus while you were in this earth, you're going to stand at what is called the Great White Throne Judgment. And see, your fate, F-A-T-E, is sealed. You're going to experience from the Great White Throne Judgment, you're going to experience the second death. But the judgment seat of Jesus, He's going to question you, talk to you about what you were ordained to do, what you have the potential to do, and what have you. And you're going to be in heaven with Him for eternity. And guess what? That old body, you left that old body in the grave. You left it. See, because the Bible says, the body will go back to the dust of the ground from where it came, but your spirit will go back to God from whence it came. But God is going to add a body to that spirit. Wow. Just like God added, you remember when they buried Jesus? They buried a body in the tomb, didn't they? But Jesus had a spirit. Jesus' spirit went where? In the hell. So after 3 days and 3 nights, Jesus was resurrected from the dead, and He went back to the tomb and got in that body. You remember when they found when Mary found Him? He was in the tomb, wasn't He? You remember He told her not to touch Him? Why would He tell her not to touch Him? She was a student. He said, don't touch Him. It's found in John the 19th chapter. He told her not to touch Him. The reason why? Because the body she was in was contaminated. And He said, don't touch me because I haven't yet ascended to my Father. I can't take any contamination to my Father. So in order for you to get to the Father, you got to drop this body of sin. Jesus went in the air, had all of our sins on Him. But He dropped all of that. And God, and the body that He had was totally cleansed. And the body that God is going to give you, totally new. Now let me go on and close this out. Anybody get anything? Yes. Now God's original intent was for man to live for eternity in this physical body. But because of the fall of Adam in the Garden of Eden, God had to change His plan for man to live for eternity in this body. Otherwise, all men were going to wind up in hell. Now listen to this very carefully now. Now part of God's plan is He uses death of the natural body in order to restore to man a new body that we will live with Him for eternity. But you have to die in this present body and believe Jesus died on the cross in order to obtain the body that God always wanted you to have. So it wasn't God that took your loved one. But it was God that gave his loved one so that your loved one could live for eternity. Amen. Is that all right? Amen. So let me say this one more time. Listen to me and take this home with you. Now, part of God's plan was he used the death of the natural body because it's going to happen. So why not take advantage of it? Now, part of God's plan is he used the death of one's natural body in order to restore to man a new body that will live for eternity. But that was God's original plan. For you to have a body that will never die. So God had to change plans. So he came up with the plan and he used the death, physical death of this natural body in order to restore to you, you know, the body that he wants you to have. Now let me read one more verse and we're through. Turn to 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15. And honestly, I'm through with you. 1 Corinthians 15, let's look at the 26th verse first. 1 Corinthians 15, 26. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. Write it down. 1 Corinthians 15 and 26. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. And let's look at the 50th verse, 50 through 55. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. Neither does corruption inherit corruption. Why? Because of contamination. 51, verse 51. But I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, and in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trump shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, given a new body. Are you listening to me? 53rd verse. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? The 57th verse. Thanks be to God, which giveth us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. So Jesus came with the plan of God so that you might have the life that he always wanted you to have. God did not, his original intent was not for man to live in filth and in nonsense, but because of sin, we are living it. But God said, I'm fixing this. And I'm going to give them what I wanted them to have initially. And that was to have an eternal body living in an eternal spirit. That's what God wants you to have. So, honey, please, you got something to look forward to. Amen? Amen? Give the Lord a hand, somebody. I wish I helped somebody. Did I help anybody? Amen.